So we have a second talk by Ugurcan Mugan, who is a graduate student at Northwestern University with Malcolm MacIver. She's going to talk about how sensory ecology affects the utility of planning.
Hello, thank you for the introduction, and thank you to the steering committee for the opportunity to present my work. I'm going to be discussing our work exploring how sensory ecology affects the utility of planning. More specifically, I'm going to be talking about how visual sensory ecology affects the utility of planning. And I'll talk about why I'm doing that at the end of the talk. Before I begin, I would also like to acknowledge the NSF for their support. We can think of behavior in terms of a spectrum, where on the one end we have reactive control, which is a simple and rapid transformation of sensory input. This results in very fast reaction times. A good example of this is swerving when we see a deer too late. On the other end of the spectrum, we have deliberative control, which includes forward simulating actions and their respective consequences before choosing an action. And this is a definition of planning that I'll be using throughout this talk. Predators that stalk are a very good example of this, and here's a video of one. It's a video of the leopard hunting an impala, and there are many different trajectories that are available to this leopard. But there's one trajectory that would most likely result in success, and that is the one that goes through the gully and hides the leopard for as long as possible. Now, if we think about different visual ecologies that animals live in, animals that live in water live in a visual ecology that is best characterized by blurry, short-range visual scenes such as this one of a nearby fish. On the other hand, animals that live terrestrially or view aerially live in a visual ecology that is best characterized by high-contrast, long-range visual scenes such as this one. Our prior work looked at quantifying the differences between these two visual ecologies. This plot shows how visual range, how far an animal can see in aquatic and aerial vision. And it also shows how visual range changes with respect to eye size. And what we see here is that animals that view aquatically see about a body length ahead. On the other, interestingly, this doesn't really change much as we increase eye size. On the other hand, animals that view aerially can see hundreds of body lengths ahead. And there's a significant increase in visual range with respect to an increase in eye size. Our prior work has shown that just prior to when fish came up onto land, a group of transitional tetrapods between fish and land animals had a big increase in eye size. Given the data I just showed you and some other anatomical changes that I don't have time to go into, this increase strongly suggests that these animals were living in water but hunting invertebrates already living on land by looking through air just above the water surface, similar to how crocodiles hunt today. While that work showed that the increase in visual range from looking outside of water led vertebrates to come up onto land, this talk argues that it also led vertebrates to evolve the capacity to plan. This animal that is living in an aquatic visual ecology and is moving about a body length per second can see only a body length away. This means that 1, it does not have enough time to plan, and 2, it does not have enough information to plan over. This prey, while moving in its world, does not encounter the predator until it's too late, at which point it has to use reactive control to be able to escape. On the other hand, animals that live in a terrestrial visual ecology and again move about a body length per second can see hundreds of body lengths ahead. This means that 1, they have enough time to plan, and 2, they have enough information to plan over. This prey here is able to see the predator, the safety point, and all of the complexities in between to think about different trajectories to take in this environment. And given this current setup, there's one trajectory that would most likely result in success, and that is the one that hides the prey the longest. Once animals have evolved the circuitry for planning due to this change in visual ecology, it is easy to think that planning would also occur with other modalities. And in fact, we do see planning in rodents through vicarious trial and error. One set of experiments that show vicarious trial and error was performed by Johnson and Reddish in 2007. In these set of experiments, they extensively trained the rats on this maze. Therefore, the rats had a perfect model of this maze. But what incentivized planning was the high uncertainty and reward location. The choice point, here labeled by the red box, is the point at which the rat pauses to think about different paths to take in this world. And we see that through play cell activity. So while the rat, the white circle, is traversing the main arm, play selectivity is very local. When the rat comes to the choice point, play selectivity indicates that the rat is considering going down both the left arm and the right arm before choosing to go down the right arm. So our first hypothesis is a synthesis of what I've been talking about so far. It is that when environments are highly uncertain, such as mobile predator and prey scenarios, planning confers a selective advantage proportionate to visual sensory range. Here, we consider predator-prey interaction and therefore a dynamic environment because prior work with rodents in environments that had stationary reward show that planning quickly transitions to the habit system. The best way to test this hypothesis would be to go back millions of years and actually look at the evolution of planning, but we can't do that. Since the brain does not fossilize, the fossil record that we do have does not provide us enough information as to how planning might have evolved. But we have computational methods. So we can think about simplifying this environment down to an environment that has no clutter and putting an agent in this environment with a predetermined visual range and a predetermined number of future states that it can forward simulate to. And a great idealized environment is the grid world. So in this grid world, we have a prey with a predetermined visual range that ranges from 1 to 5 cells ahead. The aim of the prey is to get to the goal position in the presence of a mobile predator. Both the prey and the predator can move in all cardinal directions. The predator is on average 1.5 times faster than the prey, which falls within the ecological range of 1.2 to 2 for terrestrial and aerial predator-prey dynamics. Moreover, the predator can see the entire grid world. On the other hand, the prey has to rely on its visual cone. If the predator is outside of the prey's visual cone, the prey has a belief about the predator location. This belief is updated then by a sample-based approach. At this stage of our research, we only wanted to focus on one of the agents having the ability to plan, and we decided to start with the prey having the ability to plan, while the predator has a simple reactive strategy to aggressively pursue the prey with some amount of randomness. However, we expect many of our key results to be independent of this choice. The prey's planning ability is based on the number of states or environments it can forward simulate before taking an action. For brevity, we will refer to this number as planning acuity. To gain more intuition on the effects of planning acuity, we can transform the grid world into a causal structure. This tree structure arises from the prey forward simulating both its own actions and the corresponding reactionary actions of the predator. The prey then uses this constructed tree to decide on one real action. The top node of the tree corresponds to the current state where the prey has paused to forward simulate possible futures. The prey exploring 10 future states could be a tree like this. For this grid world setup, this probably is not enough to make a good decision. As we increase planning acuity, we also increase the number of possible futures the prey simulates. At planning acuity 100, the tree depicting the explored future may look something like this. Based on this, the prey has thought out at most 9 moves ahead before taking one real action. Now I want to show 2 representative videos that demonstrate how visual range may change behavior. When visual range is 1, the prey initially goes towards the predator because of uncertainty in predator location. The prey then changes direction once it observes the predator, but the higher speed of the predator allows it to catch the prey. For longer visual ranges, we again see a similar thing where the prey initially goes towards the predator. But because the prey is able to observe the predator from afar, it's able to correct these series of initially incorrect actions to survive. Interestingly, this wall-following behavior, or thigmotaxis, that is observed across all visual ranges and is seen in these 2 videos is reminiscent of a behavior exhibited by rodents in open field tests of anxiety. Now, if we look at 100 such episodes per planning acuity to quantify survival rate, we see that there's a significant increase in survival rate with respect to an increase in the number of states the prey forward simulates, even at a limited visual range. However, the increase in survival rate with respect to planning acuity is significantly higher for longer visual ranges. Independent of visual range, we don't see any survival when the prey only simulates one future state. We can consider a prey that can see the entire grid world to calculate a bound on survival rate for this particular environment. Despite an increase in survival rate as a function of visual range, maximum mean survival rate is only about 25%. But our initial hypothesis is corroborated even in such a simple setup. Planning is significantly more advantageous for prey with longer visual ranges. So far, we have considered a very simple environment and an agent with varying visual range acting in this environment. But part of what made hunting successful for that leopard, or the safety point reachable for the prey, were the complexities in the environment. So our second hypothesis is that planning becomes significantly more advantageous for animals with longer visual sensory ranges when they are perceiving a complex habitat. Now we have to modify our grid world setup to include clutter and modify the prey to be able to see the entire grid world except where blocked by occlusions. We will vary clutter based on entropy, which provides us a metric to randomly and repeatedly generate environments that have a predetermined density of occlusions. Planning is especially important when we think about such randomly generated environments. The predator, similar to the prey, will not be able to see the prey if an occlusion exists on the ray between the prey and the predator. The predator instead will use the prey's last known location for pursuit. Again, I want to show a couple of representative videos of how now entropy affects behavior. At low entropy, we again see this, At low entropy, we again see this wall-following behavior. There aren't enough occlusions for the prey to utilize them as tools. As we increase entropy, we see a divergence from this wall-following behavior, and we actually start to see the prey using these occlusions to hide. And in fact, it times its actions based on a belief about the predator location. Complex behaviors such as hiding, seen in this video, or anti-predatory tactics occur at these mid-range entropy environments. As we increase entropy further, and therefore the density of occlusions, the world effectively becomes smaller and jungle-like, which allows for only a few paths to lead to success. Now, if we do a similar analysis and look at 100 episodes per planning acuity to quantify survival rate for now 20 randomly generated environments, we see that when entropy is low, similar to our initial findings, survival rate is low. Now, if we were to look at trajectories taken in this world that led to survival, as demonstrated by a cell visitation heat map, we would see that at low entropy, planning only leads to the discovery of this wall-following behavior, which suggests that reactive control may be just as good as planning for this kind of environment. And in fact, if we use a naive reactive control strategy based on this heat map that modifies the prey's decision-making probabilities so that it no longer is plans but uses such a reactive strategy, we see no difference in survival rate with respect to a prey that plans. As entropy increases, the incremental benefit of planning also increases until mid-entropy. If we look at the visitation heat map for episodes that resulted in survival in these mid-entropy worlds, we see that planning no longer cues one or two strategies. And in fact, it becomes important for the prey to replan at each step to take in the new environmental configuration, where the predator is with respect to the prey and the occlusions. And this replanning leads to complex behavior as the prey considers more future states before taking an action. As we increase entropy further, survival rate starts to decrease. And interestingly, we start to see survival in prey that only consider one future state ahead. This means that planning is no longer that important. Survival visitation heat map now becomes dependent on environment and predator initialization, and shows that planning again begins to cue one or two strategies. So entropy gives us a great metric to repeatedly and randomly generate these environments, and it gives us an idea about the density of occlusions in these environments. But it does not necessarily give us an idea about how these occlusions are distributed in the environment or the topological complexity of the environment. One of the ways topological complexity is quantified is by a measure called fractal dimension. The fractal dimension of an image characterizes pattern complexity with respect to different spatial scales. Aquatic images tend to have a fractal dimension between 0 and 0.9, while terrestrial natural scene images tend to have a fractal dimension between 1.1 and 1.5. Human navigation studies and virtual reality suggest that peak navigation performance occurs at environments that have a fractal dimension of 1.3. The fractal dimension of our environments indicate that environments in which we see peak performance rates fall in the upper aquatic and terrestrial ranges. Now, if we were to compare survival rate in these two distinct fractal dimension ranges, we see that there's a significant difference in survival rate when environments have a terrestrial fractal dimension versus when environments have an aquatic fractal dimension. While median survival rate for environments that fall within the range of aquatic fractal dimension is only about 20%, median survival rate for environments that have a terrestrial fractal dimension is about 80%. The basis of this talk is about why long-range vision that occurred during the water-to-land transition 380 million years ago might have facilitated the development of planning systems. Visual modality is well suited to favor the evolution of planning because it provides high temporal and spatial resolution, which is especially important in dynamic environments. If we were to consider some other sensory modalities, such as low-frequency audition or olfaction, the low-resolution nature of the sensory modality makes a newly encountered environment effectively low entropy, because most of the complexities that we were considering are not emitters themselves, and they have to be explored to be figured out. So now if we assume this animal is comfortable in its habitat and explored its habitat multiple times, and therefore knows where all of these complexities are, low-resolution nature of these sensory modalities will not provide rapid and precise updates on adversary locations. This will lead to high uncertainty in adversary location. Then a good assumption would be that prey would choose paths that are better hidden, but some of our preliminary simulations suggest that such hidden trajectories also lead to low survival rates. So to wrap things up, our results suggest that planning only benefit prey with longer visual ranges. However, at these low entropy environments, reactive strategies based on learned trajectories perform just as well. Planning becomes incrementally more important when environments increase in complexity and when animals can see these complexities. In environments that have these mid-range entropies, planning allows for the prey to choose a path that considers current environmental configuration. This replanning leads to complex behaviors such as hiding or anti-predatory tactics. Interestingly, peak performance, even in such a simple setup, also occur when the tested environments have complexities similar to terrestrial habitats. Having long-range vision, which affords both time and detection of habitat structure, may have favored the evolution of neural circuits for planning. Our ability to plan is linked to this evolutionary history. We expect that our ability to plan is roughly what was adaptive for the size and complexity of our ancestral environment. This may be why it is so difficult to plan for things far into the future, such as retirement or climate change. Research into the evolutionary basis of planning might help us in designing new methods to circumvent our limited ability to plan and deal with these far-off looming existential threats and possibly to motivate behavior. I'd like to end my talk with this quote, and I'm happy to take any questions. Yeah.
So I have a couple of technical questions and then a bigger picture question. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
The technical question is, you're assuming that the prey and the predator both have an a priori model of the other's ability to see them, right? This all depends on the fact that I'm going to use planning to avoid being in a location where the predator can see me. So it seems you're giving the animals, either one, the agnostic, quite a rich environmental model, including a model of the other agents. Is that correct?
So I'm not giving a predator any kind of model. It's just kind of aggressively pursuing the prey. But for the prey, yeah, for the one that's planning has a model about how the predator moves. That's correct.
So how, I like the story, and I actually thought it was a really interesting question as framed. But since we're talking about evolutionary time, why can't I think about all of this as having proper priors and doing learning, so that I just look at my current state. My current state will include information about where the predator is as a prey, and I can do it all looking backwards rather than looking forwards. I'm looking for something here that actually shows it needs planning per se, rather than that it couldn't have just been done by learning in some form.
Right. And the best answer I can give to that is the environments that we consider are kind of like kill or be killed environments. So for the prey, if it does all wrong, it can learn some things that are important, such as it needs to turn when it sees something. But it can't necessarily, may not be able to learn because it could die about the predator, and it may be more beneficial that it thinks about how the predator might move to choose. Because if it encounters a predator, it's not going to live, like it's not going to be able to learn. So certain things, and like a lot of predatory motions and stuff are learned because they can't capture the prey. But it also, in these types of dynamic environments where it might be irreversible, it is also important to plan.
Sorry, that's all the time we have.
Okay, sorry.